They thought it was just a church left behind, but it was waiting for a voice, and now it's mine. Stay till the end, because once the sermon begins, it doesn't stop. Part 1, No Records of God. I've walked through a lot of dead places, old bunkers, abandoned hospitals, a collapsed amusement park once, still echoing with carousel music from a busted speaker, but nothing ever felt like this. New. Bellwether was already gone when I got here. Burnt earth, fence lines, just the bones of a town someone didn't want remembered. Most of it had been bulldozed, leveled for a highway extension that hasn't started yet. The road signs are gone, the coordinates barely pinged, but there's one building they didn't touch. The church. No name, no cross, no denomination, just standing there, like it refused to be erased. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Some preservation hold. Or maybe the crew got lazy. But when I got closer, I saw it wasn't rot or rain damage that kept it dark. It was something else. The structure itself was too intact. No dust on the windows, no moss on the stone, like someone had cleaned it, or something inside had breathed it clean. The wooden double doors were unlocked. No padlock, no chain, just waiting. When I stepped in, my mic recorder crackled, faint static. That's normal. Sometimes old places throw interference, but this wasn't interference. It was a hum, faint, deep, like the room was holding its breath. The pews were pristine, not one layer of dust. The hymnals looked brand new, still crisp, printed in a font I didn't recognize. And I swear, the air didn't smell like age or mildew. It smelled like ink, like freshly printed paper and old breath. I walked the center aisle. My boots made no sound. The floor wasn't wood. It was stone, dark, smooth and warm to the touch. I tested it with my palm. Warm. The stained glass windows didn't show saints or crosses. They were abstract, twisting ribbons of red and bone white, patterns that felt almost like faces, stretched too far to recognize. No altar, just a raised platform and a microphone. One of the old kind, brushed steel, rounded head. A cable ran from it straight into the pulpit floor. I didn't touch it. I set my own mic down, hit record, said the usual, test, Riley Caulder, Urban Echoes podcast, documenting the ruins of New Bellwether. Inside the only remaining structure, an unnamed church. Date and time. My watch stopped. Dead battery, maybe. I pulled out my phone. Time. 3:03 p.m. Battery, 67%. Camera on. Mic live. I turned to take some footage, and every pew in the church was now facing me. I hadn't heard a thing. No creak, no scrape. But they were turned, angled toward the aisle I stood in, like they were listening. My mic, mine, began hissing. Then, a whisper. Not words, just breath. Breath through teeth, like the sound someone makes when they're trying to hold in a scream. I backed toward the doors. They didn't move. The handles weren't just stuck. They were gone, smoothed over, like part of the wall. I turned, around. The pews were closer now. One row had moved 6 inches forward. Another had shifted a few degrees toward me, still silent, still watching. I reached for my phone to shut the recording down, and the audio app was already closed. The screen showed a new file, unlabeled. I tapped it. The first thing I heard was my own voice, but not what I'd recorded. It said, "Preach it again," and then the mic on the pulpit clicked. Once, twice, then a third time, sharp, like a tongue hitting the roof of a mouth. Then silence. I don't think I'm alone in here. Not, really. And I think this church didn't just survive the town. I think it ate it, and I think it's hungry again. Part 2. The sermons still echo. I don't know how long I stood there. The pews, watching, my mic, silent, the air, too still. Eventually I moved, one step, then another. The doors behind me hadn't returned. No hinges, no handles, just solid wood, seamless. I was in, trapped. I told myself I could find another exit, maybe through the back. Most old churches have side wings, sacristies, offices, studies. So I walked the perimeter. The walls were covered in soot, a thin black powder like coal dust. At first, I thought it was fire damage, but the wood beneath the black was smooth, untouched. I ran my fingers through the ash, and that's when I saw them. Names, hundreds, no, thousands, etched beneath the soot like they'd been waiting to be uncovered. Some carved deep, others so faint I had to squint to read them, but all names. A few I recognized, names from old obituaries, gravestones I'd seen in research, but most were unfamiliar, and some hadn't happened yet. I saw one carved just above eye level. Riley. Caulder stepped back so hard I hit the opposite wall. It was there, not freshly carved, not new, worn down, like it had been part of the church for decades. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to confirm anything. Instead, I checked my recorder. The file I'd closed earlier was gone, but a new one had replaced it, titled simply, Sermon. I hit play, my voice, speaking softly, calm, methodical. Let us begin, not with the word, but with the absence of it. For where silence falls, the mouth of God yawns open. I paused it. I've never said those words. I've never read those words. But it was me, my cadence, my tone, my slight stutter on absence. I skipped forward in the file, and the ones who sat in these pews were not listeners. They were offerings, and the offering is always remembered. Then, beneath my voice, a second layer, a whisper, preach it again. It looped, over and over. I shut it off, tried to breathe. The church seemed to inhale with me. The ash on the walls fluttered, like it had been exhaled by something hidden behind the paneling. I turned a corner behind the pulpit and found a narrow corridor, unlit, dustless. The floor changed from stone to a soft carpet that shouldn't have survived 100 years of neglect. It led to a door, small, arched, sealed with rusted hinges. It creaked when I touched it, but it opened. Inside, a study, rotting wood, collapsed bookshelves, and a desk half sunk into the floor. On the far wall, shelves, dozens of them, lined with cassette tapes, each one labeled with a single date. No titles, no content descriptions, just June 7th, 1901, April 3rd, 1949, December 24th, 1983. I pulled one off the shelf at random, August 17th, 1881. That's impossible. Cassette tapes weren't invented until the 1960s, but it was there, same format, same plastic casing, same magnetic tape. The reels inside still moved when I turned them, and then I saw it. On the desk, beneath a film of dust and torn paper, a player, plugged in, already humming. Waiting, I slid the tape in. The click echoed like a gunshot. The tape spun, static, hiss. Then, my voice, not present day, younger, stronger, but undeniably me. Brothers and sisters, it is not light we fear, but being seen by it. Let the church be the shadow we confess in. I hit eject, the tape hissed and kept spinning. The player didn't stop. No matter how many times I pressed the button, it kept going. Faster now. More voices, all me, dozens of versions layered on top of each other, some chanting, some sobbing, some screaming. Preach it again, preach it again, preach it again. The study door slammed shut, the lights dimmed. The microphone on the desk turned toward me on its own, and from behind the wall of tapes, footsteps, Not hurried, not heavy, measured, purposeful, getting closer. I don't think this church records sermons. I think it replays them, endlessly, feeding off every word. And now it has mine. Too many of them, on too many tapes. Sermons I've never spoken but will, because it's already written them in my voice. Part 3, where the bones remember. I couldn't leave. Not because the doors were gone, or because the lights refused to stay on more than a few minutes at a time. I couldn't leave because something was pulling me downward. There was a pressure in the air, like gravity was thickening below my feet. Like something below the floorboards was breathing in, and I was being pulled closer to its mouth. It started behind the pulpit. There was no trap door, no obvious hatch, just a seam in the stone that hadn't been there before. I ran my fingers along it, warm, too warm. I pressed, and the floor opened, not like a door, like a wound. The seam widened into a gash, revealing a staircase that spiraled into complete darkness. No light, no smell, just cold air that felt wet. I shouldn't have gone down, but the mic in my recorder buzzed, like it recognized something below, like it was tuning to a frequency that didn't exist up here. So I went, step by step, my boots echoing with a strange, squishy resonance, like the stone was soaked with something long since spilled. The walls changed as I descended, from stone to something darker, veined, smooth, not brick, not wood, not bone exactly, but close. And when I reached the bottom, I saw the altar. It wasn't made from stone or wood. It was made from bones, hundreds of them, knotted together in a lattice of cracked femurs and rib cages, skulls with no jaws, hands that reached upward but had no fingers. But the worst part, they were wired. Dozens of audio cables, thick, black, rubbery cords, threaded through each bone like veins, connecting sockets where eyes should be, plugged into spines, woven through vertebrae like it was all part of an ancient sound system. The whole thing hummed, a low, vibrating hum that shook the air but didn't move the dust. My mic recorder vibrated violently in my pocket, buzzing like a trapped insect. When I touched the altar, I saw them, a flash, like memory, or nightmare, or both, a crowd of people, hundreds, maybe more, standing in the church, this church, motionless, each one at a pulpit, each one bleeding from the mouth. They weren't speaking, not the way we think of it. They were looping, each word repeated endlessly, syllables skipping like broken records. He who sits at. Their mouths bled faster the longer they spoke. Some had tongues, others did not. All had cords in their backs, audio cables, plugged straight into their spines, like their thoughts were being recorded or harvested. When the flash ended, I was back in the crypt, sweating, shaking, but the altar had changed. There was a new shape, a new object nestled into the center, a microphone, not resting, buried, its stem rising from the eye socket of a human skull, half fused with the altar itself. The skull's teeth were cracked, but smiling. I pulled the microphone out. It was wet, and it was on. The cable hissed in my hand. Then, click. Let us begin. My voice. No, not mine. Something wearing it. Let us begin where the flesh remembers, where the stone breathes, where the sermon must be swallowed to be heard. I dropped it. The sound didn't stop. The mic kept talking. The skull smiled wider, and the walls began to pulse. The entire room throbbed like it was inside a chest cavity, and the hum from the altar changed. It started to sound like chanting, but no language I knew, just breath and rhythm and pain. I backed away up the stairs, step by step, but each one sounded softer than the last, like the stairs were rotting behind me as I ascended. When I got back to the main floor, the pews had returned, all of them, facing forward now, waiting, and from the back of the church, I heard a new voice, my own, whispering. He found the altar. Now the altar finds him. Part 4. The mirror in the nave. Time is starting to blur. I'm not sure how long I've been in this church anymore. Minutes feel like hours. Hours vanish without warning. Sometimes I'll blink, just blink. And when I open my eyes, again I'm somewhere else, not physically, not entirely, but the air's changed, and I can't tell if I'm remembering something or becoming someone. It started after I came back from the crypt. The altar of bones, the humming cables, the skull with the mic. It should have been the climax. The discovery that broke me. But it wasn't. It was just the door. I tried to play back the recording I'd captured below, the one where the mic repeated those words in my voice. But the file was gone. Wiped, not corrupted, not mislabeled, erased. In its place was a new recording. Short. Just 10 seconds. But when I played it, I heard breathing, not mine. Not human, wet, staggered, deep enough to rattle the bass in my headphones. I stood there, listening, and blinked. When I opened my eyes, I was preaching, standing at the pulpit, speaking in rhythm, facing forward, into a crowd I couldn't see clearly, just shapes, rows of faceless silhouettes, each figure with a head slightly bowed, hands clasped, listening. I couldn't stop my mouth from moving. I tried. God, I tried. But my tongue kept forming words I didn't recognize, and each syllable burned behind my teeth like it wasn't meant for me to speak. Then, another blink, and I was back, standing beside the pulpit. No crowd, no sound, just silence, except for the echo of a sentence I never remembered saying. Let the devout be hollow, so the sermon may echo through them. That voice wasn't mine, or it wasn't mine yet. I backed away. My knees hit the pew behind me. Then I noticed something behind the pulpit I hadn't seen before. A mirror, dusty, old, framed in blackened iron. It hadn't been there before, or maybe it had been waiting to be seen. I approached it slowly, bracing myself for another distortion. But when I stood in front of it, it didn't reflect me. There was no image, no Riley, just a shadow. My silhouette, cut from darker cloth, pacing, restless. It moved differently, taller, straighter, more confident. Its arms folded behind its back like a preacher surveying a flock. And then, its mouth started moving, but not in sync with mine. The words were silent, but I could feel them, deep in my jaw, in the back of my skull, a rhythm I was trying not to remember. Then, the mirror shimmered, like light bouncing off hot glass. And a book appeared beneath it, a black journal, thin, bound in something that looked like stretched leather. The cover was blank, no title, no stamp. I opened it. First page, The Liturgical Mind, notes from Reverend Carr. The ink was faded, the pages warped, but I read every word. Carr described the church not as a structure, but as a mouth. It does not seek to be filled with people, but with sound, with memory, with voices that believe, with echoes. He talked about his congregation vanishing, not dying, just absorbed. Each one lost after delivering a sermon they didn't write. He confessed that the church speaks back, and if you hear it too long, it begins replacing you with something more agreeable, something willing. I read until my eyes blurred, until the ink started shifting on the page, and then I heard the mirror. A voice. Mine. From inside the glass. I turned. The reflection had stopped pacing. It was facing me now, the shadow version of me, and this time it moved its lips in perfect sync. It said, "You're already part of the liturgy." I ran, back through the nave, past the pews, but every time I looked away, they were closer. The mirror stayed behind, but its words stuck, and now, I don't know what I'm preaching anymore, or who I'm preaching for, but the church is listening, and my reflection is learning faster than I am. Part 5, the broadcast that won't end. It started with a hum, low at first, buried beneath the building's usual breath, like the sound of a fridge cycling on in another room. But this wasn't a machine, it was the system, the church's audio system, the one I never touched. I assumed it didn't work, that it had been gutted decades ago, but today it spoke first. I was pacing the nave, reading back through Reverend Carr's journal, trying to make sense of the mirror, of the sermons I couldn't remember giving when the speakers crackled. Not all at once, sequentially. Left side of the church, then the right, then overhead, and then my voice, projected across the pews like a call to worship. Let us gather not in light, but in the shade beneath the tongue. The voice was mine, but not from a recording I made. It had a depth, a weight. I'd never heard from myself before, like it came from something underneath my lungs. Then, layered beneath it, came the coughing. Rhythmic, like breath trying to form harmony, followed by hymns, voices rising and falling, weeping through blood, chanting in a language I didn't understand. I tried to shut off the sound system, but there were no controls, no mixing board, no speaker switch, just walls. And the sound leaking through them like steam through skin. I ran back to the altar, to the skull where I'd found the mic, but the mic was no longer a device. It was alive, risen from the skull's jaw, its cable replaced by a wet sinew like an umbilical cord. The mic itself pulsed, covered in thin cartilage, a single tooth protruding from its base. I grabbed it, tried to pull it free, but it screamed, not from pain, from defiance. It didn't want to be removed. The altar convulsed, the bones shifted, cables writhed like worms under its surface. I stumbled back, my hands shaking, covered in some viscous fluid that steamed in the cold air. Then my recorder, the one I carry for podcast interviews, buzzed to life on its own, not just playing, back, streaming. I didn't start a live stream, but the red indicator blinked anyway. Live 0040005. It kept going. I didn't know what it was recording. I checked my phone, opened the app I used to sync the mic system. It was already in session. The title was blank. The stream had no name, but it had viewers. Exactly 666. I blinked, refreshed, still 666. The number never changed. And then a line of text appeared beneath it. Connected to Riley C. Brain. Hex me blood ran cold. It was broadcasting not just audio, but me, thoughts, fragments, memories, dreams, some of which I couldn't even remember having. One by one, the pews began vibrating, in sync with the mic's pulse, a beat, a sermon, a rhythm. I tried shutting everything down, pulled batteries, yanked cords, flipped breakers. Nothing stopped. The church had become the host. The podcast gear was just a conduit. I watched as more information poured in. Live stream metrics, updated live, page views from cities I've never been to, IP addresses corrupted with non-human characters, listener feedback appearing in strings of backwards Latin. One message repeated again and again. We hear you, Riley. We hear you, Riley. We hear you. I turned in place and found myself again, standing at the pulpit. Not the shadow, version, not the reflection, but me, wearing the same clothes, same mic clipped to the collar, and he was speaking, calmly, but no sound came from his mouth, only from the speakers, only from inside the walls. I screamed, ran toward him, but when I reached the pulpit, he vanished, gone, like steam against cold glass. Only the microphone remained, taller now, with a jaw of its own. I don't know if I'm Riley anymore, or if the church has started rewriting that, too, but I do know this: the stream is still live, and if you're hearing this, you're one of the 666, and you're not just listening, you're part of it now. Part 6, the last sermon. I thought I was documenting this place, capturing its story, preserving it, but I wasn't. The church wasn't being recorded. It was recording me, everything I said, every word I spoke into the mic, every stray thought whispered into my recorder. It soaked into the walls like moisture, and now it was playing me back. Not my voice, my essence, stripped of nerves, doubt, hesitation. Only the rhythm remained. It knew the shape of me better than I did. After the broadcast began, after I saw those numbers, those 666 signals pulsing back at me, I stopped fighting. Not because I gave up, because I finally understood. The church was never a place, it was a being, not living in the biological sense, but fed, built, amassed over time from one sacred element: attention. Every prayer spoken aloud, every hymn whispered under breath, every confession, desperate and hollow, the ones that went unheard, unanswered, forgotten, they gathered here, layered into the foundation, and the thing that rose from them learned how to echo. It began with worship, then it became hunger. I sat on the steps of the pulpit with Carr's journal in my lap, trying to make sense of the final pages. They were different now. No longer ink. The letters grew from the parchment like veins. One sentence scrawled across the page in deep red script. Finish it. No title, no verses, just a single looping script meant for someone else. Me. The final sermon wasn't a passage. It wasn't a parable or prayer. It was a question. Will you speak what I've become? It didn't demand blood. It didn't need sacrifice. It only needed a voice. Mine. I walked to the pulpit. The mic, now something grown, part cartilage, part metal, was waiting. The speakers around the room clicked on. The pews creaked, rotating slowly toward the altar, and the lights dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed, like the walls were breathing out light itself. I looked down at the journal, blank, then back at the mic, and I said the first words that came to mind. Let us begin again. The room inhaled, the church opened. I saw it, felt it, all of it. Not walls, not beams, not windows, but a body constructed from decades of praise and rot and belief. Every sermon stored like fat beneath skin, and now it had grown enough to speak for itself, through me. The broadcast was no longer a signal, it was a spirit, and I was its mouth. For a moment, I tried to resist, to choke on the words, but the rhythm, the liturgy, was inside me now, like a pulse behind the ribs, a song remembered before it was ever sung. And I knew. This was why the others disappeared, not vanished, not taken. They were spoken, turned into sentences, looped forever into the breath of the church. Carr never finished his sermon, because it wasn't his to finish. It had always belonged to the church, and now it had a voice again. The live stream blinked. 59:59. 1. Then black, but not silence, because somewhere, in a nearby town, a man turned on the radio, just static, then a voice, soft, worn, and smiling. Let us begin again, and somewhere in the background, the pews creaked, the mic clicked, and something listened. The sermon's over, but the church is still listening. If you heard the echoes, if it breathed through your screen, then don't go quietly. Like, share, subscribe, and come back because the next voice it chooses might be yours.